الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمه مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف هما ما كانوش عارفين،
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين، علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي هما ما كانوش فاهمين،
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع لي الجميلة ونسى الآخرين. من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدتي نتا ورجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين،
واش نذكر واش نخلي شهداء رواحهم طاهرين، مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم،
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين
باللي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين،
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Jazair Hope platform. I hope you are spending with your loved ones a very good Ramadan and you are fasting very well. Thank you again for being present today. Today, this is our first broadcast in English, and there are many reasons for that. So, most importantly, our guests speaks English. But also because, as you know, Algeria has promoted this year and introduced this year English to the primary schools. And I said, let's try and make this, start to make this as a habit to speak English among Algerians. So, Shir, thank you very much for accepting our invitation today.
Thank you very much, and Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you, Shir. So, as I said, the subject is also very important. So we will be speaking about the industry of disinformation, and the discussion stems from a thought when I saw an article of Shir about the subject, which I found very thorough. So I said, let me discuss with him and share his views with our fellow Algerians. So, as a matter of introduction, Shir is I am displaying in the screen his blog. So he is a political economist. He holds a PhD from the Free University of Berlin, and as you can see in his blog, you can go through it. There is a thorough description of his background. But to know him a little bit better, I wanted to start with the question that stems from what I thought is his background. You will see from his publication that his views are, I think, at least are mostly against the mainstream media. So I wanted to ask you, Shir, to know you a little bit better, and for my audience to know you better, why you look like having views, at least to say, against the mainstream media line of conduct.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me and for this question. I don't agree that my views are against mainstream media. We have to explain what is actually the mainstream media. I think we have different kinds of media. If you mean by mainstream corporate media or Western media, maybe I can understand it more. But our topic today, the disinformation industry, which comes from Israel, is an industry which has been exposed by mainstream media. I mean, it was actually many Western and corporate newspapers and television channels and so on, which are very concerned with the disinformation industry. And if we talk about media in terms of the mainstream, the world today, I think the majority of people around the world who know about Palestine would agree that Israel is an apartheid state. There are people who support the boycott movement, the BDS movement, all over the world, and the idea that to support Israeli apartheid, Israeli colonialism, Israeli occupation is mainstream is I don't think it's true. I think it's maybe for those of us who live in Western European countries and we are exposed to those governments who support Israeli colonialism, and then we think it's the mainstream. But the world is bigger than just Europe.
Thank you very much. This is very clear, and it was important that we clarified this point. So thank you for the clarification. And now getting into our topic, which is this disinformation technology. In your article, you state that this is done by Israel as a state. Do you really mean that? That it's not just a group of activists or companies, it's the Israel state who exports the disinformation technologies?
There is a very complicated relationship between those companies and the Israeli state. We're talking about companies. Some of the companies are actually fake companies. They're not registered anywhere. The most famous one is called the Jorge's Team. And the name Jorge's Team was given to it by the organization Forbidden Stories of journalists because the company doesn't really have a name. So this is not the state. This is just a group of people. But if you look a bit closer, you see, first of all, these people are former Israeli intelligence officers. They have worked for the Israeli state, they worked for the Israeli military, and they use the very same technology that they are now exporting and selling against Palestinians. So that's how this technology came to be. And this is also what they use in order to convince their customers to buy it. They say, oh, we have experience. We used it against Palestinians. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the state of Israel has laws that regulate very closely the military industry. And they say nobody can sell Israeli military technology, and that includes intelligence technology, without approval of the Israeli Ministry of Defense. And even if you register your company outside of Israel, but you're selling Israeli technology, the Israeli Ministry of Defense has a special organization, not the Mossad, another organization, which is enforcing this law to track down Israeli officers who decide to sell this technology after leaving the country, for example. And we have this report from Tal Hanan. Tal Hanan is the head of this company, Jorge's Team. And he said, I've been doing this for 20 years, more than 20 years. So he has been doing this for 20 years from an Israeli city. Of course, the Israeli Ministry of Defense know exactly what he's doing. They know what he is selling, to whom he is selling. They approve it. And if they approve it, that means they have responsibility. So in that sense, I say, yes, the state of Israel has responsibility. Even if they're not using state institutions to sell this technology, they tolerate it. And this has to do also with the complex relationship between the Israeli government and these companies and the former officers in the military, because in Israel, the officers retire very young from military service. They have time for a second career. And this is part of the policy of the government to give them a chance to start their own company and become arms dealers as a way to make sure that they're happy and they don't speak against the government and they don't protest too much. And now we're seeing that in Israel. Now we see big protests by officers, by people from the military, but they know if they protest too much, then the government can take away their licenses to export weapons and this technology.
Understood. No, this is very clear. So, matter of fact, you are saying that they motivate them by giving them a second career and keep them close to the government views. Shir, I missed to say something. One of the reasons I wanted to speak about this topic, it's because in Algeria, we know, and it's not that we believe, we know that we are a target of this disinformation industry. Matter of fact, if you Google Algeria, most of the information that will come out is extremely negative. So that is the first level of how you can see it. So because of that, I have put a small poll to our audience to give their opinion from where this disinformation campaign are orchestrated. So this is the question in the screen, and the option I gave are: do you think that the disinformation against Algeria is orchestrated from Morocco, from Israel, or from France, or for that matter from many other countries in the same time? So I ask our audience to answer this question, which is at the top of the chat, and we will look at the results by the end of this discussion. And for that matter, Shir, if you have time to analyze this point, it will be great to read an article about your views on this, because it's a hot topic in Algeria, where the whole country feel that the country is genuinely targeted to be destabilized. Anyway, so getting back to our discussion, my next question, Shir, is if you can explain to us how these technologies operates, if you can give examples where they were deployed and what were the motives.
Yeah, I think we need to separate between what exactly is the disinformation industry, what it does, and how it functions. Because what you just showed us in the poll that you're asking our audience is a question about who is manipulating information about Algeria. But the question who is doing it and for what purpose is separate from the question of how. The Israeli companies that distribute this information, they do it for customers from all over the world, right? So if somebody wants to spread disinformation against a country or against a candidate in a political election, they can do it in any country in the world and for whatever reason that they have, but then they go to this Israeli company to buy the technology or to the service of distributing this disinformation. So that's the main point here. Maybe you all remember the scandal with the company Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was a company in Britain that had a deal with Facebook to take information from people in order to spread fake news. And the reason that Cambridge Analytica did this is in order to influence elections. They try to tamper in different kinds of elections all around the world. There's maybe 200 cases where elections, either local elections or national elections or referendum, were tampered one way or another by Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica used an Israeli company called Archimedes. Once this scandal became public in 2018, Cambridge Analytica went bankrupt and dissolved, but the company Archimedes was able to go behind the scenes. There were no charges pressed against them. They were not interrogated. And even in the actual hearings against Cambridge Analytica, the experts couldn't remember the names of the people from Archimedes Group. They only remember that they were Israelis. So this is what is actually being done. When you want to win an election, you can use fake information to discredit your opponent, make people think this person is maybe a criminal, the opponent is maybe has some kind of inappropriate behavior, and then they will not vote for that person, and you can win the election. According to these Israeli companies, this is something that cost something starting from 6 million euros. 6 million euros is not a lot of money, actually. If you want to win an election and you want to be a president of a country, 6 million euros is not a lot to pay for that.
It's very small money,
Yeah. So this is something that we found out by this new revelation by investigative journalists. But what is also very interesting is how they do it. How do you make people believe in something which is not true? And the way that they do it is they build an army of fake avatars. This Team Jorge that I mentioned before, they have an army of 40,000 fake avatars. What is a fake avatar? It's a person that doesn't really exist, but they exist on social media. They have a face, a picture that was stolen from a real person, and they have a name that is made up. They have hobbies and a story and a family, and everything is made up. And they can even have money, real money, in an electronic wallet, which allows them to buy subscriptions, and that makes their avatar more believable. These fake people are all under the control of the company. So if they want to spread some rumor and say this person is acting inappropriately or this person is a criminal, then all 40,000 avatars can start to spread that rumor. And when people see it coming from all different directions, it's very believable, it's very reliable. And this is very dangerous because then it's very difficult to tell the truth from the lie. And when
what we call the crowd effect.
The crowd effect, yes. And in addition to that, we know that these companies are also hacking into people's phones in order to not just to take information from them, to surveil them and to read their messages from their phones, but also to write on their phones. So that means that they can go into your phone and write a message as if you wrote it and send it to somebody else. So in many cases, they use this to create the impression, for example, that a married person is having an affair, sending love messages through their phone to some person that they're not married to. And this discredits them and causes them a conflict within their own family and problems, which makes it difficult for them to win the elections. And they can also hack into emails in the same way and send an email from that person's account, so it looks like a genuine email. And many times you have different kinds of mechanisms to protect privacy of people. So, for example, if you want to register for a certain service in a certain country, then they say you have to give a phone number. We will send you an SMS with a code, and you have to give the code to confirm that you really are who you say you are. So what these companies do, they hire a spy to go to these countries where they want to influence the elections, and that person has a phone. And so when they get the message, they send the code, and that creates credibility. So this way, they can build a whole campaign of fake news, of fake information. They falsify documents. This is very illegal, of course, very, very illegal. But if you put all of these things together, it can lead to the point where people have been murdered. I mean, this is a very, very dangerous manipulation of the truth. And this is how disinformation works, mostly for elections, but not only for elections. It's also for public relations campaigns. There is a famous billionaire from Mexico who is being charged of very serious crimes, and he hired this company in order to attack the people who are making the accusations against him. And so you can do a lot of dangerous things with this information.
Matter of fact, just to give you my views on what's happening in Algeria, it's exactly what you are saying, and the objective is to make believe that the Algerians are living in a very bad situation compared to other countries who are prospering, and it's a message to the youth to revolt. to go into the street, because they believe that they are living much worse than the rest of the neighbors or the other countries. While when you look at the index of human development of Algeria, you will see that Algeria is among the best countries. It has a very high level of human development. Anyway, it is just to give my views in the context that you are describing. One of the concepts that I have read in your article speaks about spyware diplomacy. Sorry. So I wanted you to elaborate this to our audience, please.
Yeah, the concept, the term spyware diplomacy was coined when Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister now, but he was prime minister for many, many years in Israel. And during the time when spyware was used to assassinate Jamal Khashoggi by the Saudi government, and this was again, they were using Israeli spyware. And at the same time, we saw Hungary using spyware against opposition forces within Hungary, and we saw Poland using spyware against Voices for Democracy in Poland, and we saw spyware being used against the lawyers and the journalists who were trying to investigate the disappearance of 43 students in Mexico, which were, we call it a disappearance, but most likely we're talking about murder of these students. And the lawyers, the human rights lawyers, were hacked by spyware. And then an investigation by various journalists showed that every country that is using spyware against human rights activists, against progressive forces, is a country which had a visit by Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu goes to these countries, which normally did not necessarily have very good relations with Israel. For example, Saudi Arabia, or even Hungary, Poland, and Mexico were not very strong allies of Israel until Netanyahu came and spoke with these governments and said, we have technology that we use against Palestinians. Do you want to have that technology as well? And so they, in exchange for having the right to sign a contract with these companies, and you remember I said before, these are private companies, but actually it's the Israeli government which is standing behind it and allowing these companies to do business with these countries. And these governments from authoritarian regimes are saying, we agree to give diplomatic support to the state of Israel and to, for example, denounce Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, the two largest human rights organizations in the world, which said that Israel is an apartheid state. So they would speak up against the human rights organizations and defend Israel in exchange for receiving spyware. This is spyware diplomacy. Netanyahu has specifically chosen some of the worst regimes in the world when he made his diplomatic trips, because he says to his own the public in Israel understands that democratic countries cannot support Israel anymore. Israel has never been a democracy, but now it's very clear to everyone. So Netanyahu says, well, we don't, our biggest trade partners are West Europe and North America, but we can find new allies. We can find new allies with spyware. And this is spyware diplomacy means to go to these dictators who need weapons to suppress protesters, and they get those weapons from Israel. And the weapon is spyware and also disinformation technology. And in exchange, they give Israel diplomatic support.
Absolutely. And just to elaborate on what you are saying, again, in Algeria, there was a serious scandal about Morocco using the Pegasus software, where they have been trying to spy against Algerian government persons.
Let me tell you something about this story, because this is a very good example. Morocco made a peace treaty with Israel and started diplomatic relationship after or at the same time that they were buying the spyware. And then Amnesty International and Citizen Lab and Forbidden Stories discovered that the Moroccan government used Israeli spyware to spy on the phone of Emmanuel Macron, the president of France.
Yes.
And then it's very interesting what happened, because the Israeli Ministry of Defense, who gave the approval to sell this to Morocco, and and knew, of course, that they are going to use it to spy on the phone of Macron, he flew to Paris And everybody said, okay, he's going to try to apologize now to Macron because of the way that the spyware was used. And he met with Macron, but he did not apologize. And Macron decided to drop it and not to do anything about it anymore. So you can make whatever conclusion you want from this. I don't have the Israeli Minister of Defense at the time, Benny Gantz, blackmailed Macron, but it looks like blackmail. It looks like he met him and said, I know what is in your phone.
Yeah. Look, there is another case which there is wide belief in Algeria that it was a blackmailing situation. Also, is about the Prime Minister of Spain, who changed the political position of Spain versus the problem in the Occidental Sahara, Western Sahara, suddenly without checking with the parliament or with the government and so on. So, which makes it believe that he was also blackmailed through Pegasus. Anyway, this takes us to another important question here, which is about this disinformation cannot be deployed, or to be deployed efficiently in the era of social media. It needs to use the key social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. Do you think that there is some kind of complicity in there? Because we cannot imagine such big companies, they don't know what's happening when there are campaigns of disinformation of specific topic anywhere in the world.
The complicity of Facebook, now it's called Meta, the company, has already been revealed and exposed and discussed a lot. I think there is very little that I can add to this conversation. Everyone who will look into this very quickly will see that this is a company that was absolutely aware. Also from the time of Cambridge Analytica, when they provided secret information about their users to a company for money, they have committed a serious crime. And Facebook was never really held accountable for this crime. But they continue to do it. And if you use social media and you see that whatever choices you make and whatever likes you give or whatever engagement you have with social media changes the way that you get information from the social media, and it recommends to you content and says, oh, you clicked on this, maybe you want to see this, maybe we will try to tailor a commercial for you, an advertisement for you. This is exactly the way that social media is using your personal information.
Yeah.
They are selling it to private companies. If it is private companies that try to sell you shampoo, okay, I mean, this is not so dangerous. But if they sell this information to a disinformation corporation, which is using that information to harm people and to spread news, fake news against them, and to destroy their reputation in order to make them not be able to speak in public spaces and not be able to become candidates for the elections, then of course it's complicity, and it's very criminal by these companies. You know, Twitter has a new policy where they say that if you want to prove that you really are who you say you are, you can have a blue tick next to your name that authenticates your identity, and it costs money, and it's supposed to show that you really are the company and not somebody trying to impersonate.
Yeah.
Tal Hanan, this Israeli intelligence officer that I mentioned before from Jorge's team, he said, I went to Twitter and immediately bought thousands of these blue ticks from Twitter. I just spend the money and I use these ticks for my fake avatars. He has an army of avatars. Now they have the blue tick as if they are confirmed as real people. So a lot of actual human beings who don't want to pay the money, they don't have the blue tick. So they cannot prove that they are real. But the fake avatars, they can prove that they are real. Of course, this really is not just complicity, but it is really encouraging those disinformation companies to operate, and it's a business model which creates profit for the social media companies by trading in people's private information and by spreading fake information.
So yeah, thank you very much for clarifying this. So it's not only complicity; it's making money out of this. As you said. One last question on this topic, Shir, is about the ultimate the ultimate how things will get at the end, because it's like we have saying in Algeria or a game we call it غالب مغلوب, which means the winner is the loser. So eventually these tarnishes the countries or companies or individuals who use such without any scruples practices. So do you see this happening in the case of Israel?
You know, there is a reason we didn't talk about it, and we need to talk about it. Why are these disinformation companies Israelis? Why is the spyware industry an Israeli industry? Is it because the Israelis have access to technology that nobody else has? That's not the case. They don't have any technology that the United States doesn't have, and Russia and China. Of course, Israel has also the same technology, but all of these other countries, they don't want to sell it for profit. They don't want to have disinformation companies and spyware companies that export it for profit, because they understand in the long term this is very dangerous. You don't want to give to customers from other countries access to this kind of technology. But the Israelis are willing to do it. And I think it is because of their very short-sighted perspective. I think a lot of Israelis are really seeing the end of the Zionist project, and they understand that the state of Israel, as it defines itself as a Jewish state, as an apartheid state, is not sustainable. So they don't think about the long term. They just think about making a contract now and getting €1 million now very quickly, so they can be rich and then just protect themselves for the day after there will be no more state of Israel.
This is very strong statement. So do you mean that it's really a short-term attitude towards making money without any interest for Israel as state? So there is no belief that the state will stay.
Among a lot of people, there is no belief that the state will stay. A lot of Israelis believe today that the Zionist movement has come to an end, and that they understand that in the land of Palestine, Jews are now a minority and Palestinians are a majority. So if there will be democracy, it will not be a Jewish state. The only thing that keeps it sustainable is international support, Western support for Israeli apartheid. And this Western support comes in the form of weapons, mainly from the United States, diplomatic support, and so on. And it's getting lower every year. It becomes weaker. So the Israelis see it, they understand. But it's not only that. It's also that the Israeli government finds it very difficult to keep together all the different parts of society. It's not just that it's Jews against Palestinians. It's much more complex. Within the Israeli public, the Jewish Israeli public, there are many groups, religious groups and secular groups, Mizrahi Jews, which are Jews who come originally from Arab countries, including from Algeria, against European Jews like myself. And all of these different groups are fighting each other, or there's a lot of tension between them. And the government understands these retired officers are another group. And if they don't get permission to sell their technology to whoever they want so that they have an income and they have an industry, then they will also turn against the government. And because the government has such a narrow majority, such a narrow and weak control over the public, they depend on these people. And they continue this short-term arrangement, giving them a little bit more permission to do to sell this technology a little bit more, so that they can survive one more month, one more week. But yeah, this is not the behavior of somebody who's planning for the long term.
Yeah, look, this is very, very interesting. It's the first time I hear this bluntly like this, and it takes me to our last question that I have prepared for this discussion, which is related to what's happening in Middle East right now, in Israel, and in light of the recent agreement between Saudi and Iran, which was one of the main issues that we believe that Israel and other states like the US were using to keep their dominance in the region. So how do you see things unfolding in the coming weeks and months in light of the recent very important development here?
I agree. This is a very important development. And even though, I think both the government of Saudi Arabia and the government of Iran are not democratic governments, and they don't represent the interests of their own public. But think about all the people in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and also in Palestine. They are very happy about this agreement. This peace agreement, after centuries of conflict, really brings hope to the whole region. The only country that really, really hates this agreement and fights against it is Israel. They don't like the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran because the whole strategy.
Let me tell you, sorry to interrupt you, it's not the only, maybe it's the only government, but we have one opponent in Algeria, his name is Juteux, is very unhappy about this agreement. So this is a message to our people who are listening to us now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah,
so he is aligned. So what I mean, he is aligned with Israel.
Yeah, well, people who profit from conflict, I treat them very suspiciously. Like, why are you profiting from conflict? Why are you angry that the conflict is coming to an end? We want to have peace. We want to have justice, and this agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran is a step in the right direction. But for the Israeli government, this is a disaster, really a disaster, because the Israeli government built its international support that I'm talking about all this time. Why is the West supporting Israel so much? Why is the European Union and the United States give so much money and weapons to the Israeli government? They use the Israeli government as a proxy of Western power in the Middle East, as a kind of fortress. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak said, Israel is a villa in the jungle. Think about how a colonial term he was using, a villa in the jungle. Yeah. Now, why do they need this villa? They need it because countries like Saudi Arabia, who are not very strong militarily, but they have a lot of money, they can rely on the Israeli military strength to protect them from Iran or to threaten Iran. Today, I think it's a bit ridiculous. Everybody understands that the Israeli military strength is very weak. And it's not as strong as it used to be. In 2017, you may remember that Saudi Arabia captured the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Hariri, and kept him almost in prison, or not almost, really in prison. And then they expected the Israeli military to invade Lebanon. They wanted a war, which will justify their action, and that was part of their plan. But the Israelis were afraid. They remembered that in 2006, when they invaded Lebanon, it didn't end well for them. It was a very big humiliation for the Israeli military in 2006. So the soldiers in the Israeli army and the officers said, we don't want a war in Lebanon. And they refused the request by Saudi Arabia to start a war. And I think that's one of the reasons that Saudi Arabia said, we cannot really rely on the support of the Israeli military. They're not so strong as they used to be. And we need to think about other options. The fact that there is now war in Ukraine and the West and NATO countries are very focused on that gave an opportunity for the Chinese government to start becoming more active in the Middle East. And they were negotiating this agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, the Israeli intelligence claim they have been following the negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but for a whole year. But I think they're lying. I don't believe them. I think they were taken completely by surprise. And it shows that the Israeli intelligence is not so all-powerful as we like to think sometimes. They don't know everything. They don't have spies everywhere. There's a lot that they don't know. They missed it.
It's part of what we are discussing, disinformation technologies.
Yeah. But disinformation is to create lies. In a good intelligence, an effective intelligence organization doesn't create lies, it finds out the truth.
Truth and solutions, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the Israeli intelligence organizations don't do that. They don't find out the truth. They just create lies. And because of that, they themselves don't know the truth. And so they didn't know what's going to happen between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And now the United States doesn't need Israel anymore to threaten Iran, because if there's the peace treaty and now Saudi Arabia can stand between China on the one side and the United States on the other, then the United States don't have the options there anymore. Why should they give billions of dollars of weapons to Israel when Israel is not able to project US military strength in the Middle East anymore. So if they stop the military financing for Israel, that means Israel will lose its most important diplomatic military support in the world. And all the Israelis know that without this support, there is no state of Israel. There is no Jewish state. And because they know this, and because they see what is happening, this confirms what I told you before. The Israelis, a lot of Israelis don't think that they're going to have a state, or at least not the same kind of state. Maybe there will be a democracy. We are all hoping that there will be a democracy, but certainly not an apartheid state in a few years.
This is excellent to hear this. Thank you very much, Shir. I have covered all the questions I had. I will present now the results of the poll. Maybe it does not talk to you a lot immediately, but I look forward, if you have time, to analyze this situation between Algeria and Morocco, and I hope to read your views one day, sometime soon. I mean, so our audience thinks that the disinformation warfare orchestrated against Algeria comes mostly from Morocco and Israel. There is 33% who thinks that it's coming from several places in the same time. But if we add up the portions of Morocco and Israel, it's 60%, which I think reflects what's happening. I don't know if you want to comment on this, Shir.
Well, I think it's very interesting to see those reports. I would say that the way to distribute fake information has become, unfortunately, very easy. Like I said, it only costs about 6 million euros to hire a disinformation company to do it. So if I would participate in this poll, I would vote for the last option, to say it comes from different directions at the same time, because anyone who wants to spread disinformation can do it. Maybe it's interesting to see where most of the disinformation is coming from in terms of the content, and what is the purpose of spreading this disinformation. I think now that Morocco has signed a treaty with Israel, something that I think most of the public in Morocco very much is not happy about. The public in Morocco is not happy that the government signed a treaty with Israel. But
we are sure of that also, Shir.
Yeah, and I also think that for a lot of people, the West Sahara struggle against Moroccan occupation and the struggle for freedom is connected to the struggle of Palestinians for freedom, and connected to any indigenous population, any native group fighting against occupation, against colonialism. I think Algerians can absolutely appreciate that. And I don't know if there's any country, certainly not in the region, that has paid such a heavy price for fighting against colonialism like the Algerians. And that's something that maybe we can have another conversation one day about the perspectives that Israelis have about Algeria, and how the Israeli military studies the Algerian revolution as a way to learn how to control the Palestinians better.
Have you written on this, Shir?
A little bit, yes. Actually, in my first book, I talk about the dilemma that for Palestinians, I mean, if the state of Israel and the occupation and the apartheid come to an end, what will come next? That's still not clear. We spoke about maybe the end of the Zionist movement, but what will happen next? And I think a lot of Palestinians see it as a choice to go the path of Algeria or to go the path of South Africa.
Yeah, and for matter of fact, you also said it indirectly. If it is a democracy, it will be the Palestinian who will run the country.
Of course, but yeah, of course, but it could also be not a democracy, and still the Palestinians will run the country. This is also a possibility. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shir, for this. So I really appreciate your last point about maybe discussing how the Israeli military looks at the Algerian revolution. And the matter of fact, we know a little bit about it, how they look at it, because the only hope that Palestine has is coming from Algeria, because Algeria has fought colonialism for 132 years, and Palestine is occupied for 70 years or so. So when you see and compare the two, there is still hope. So that one day Palestine will be free. But definitely, I take note of your proposition. I look forward to read from you about the disinformation warfare that exists between Morocco and Algeria. That will be very interesting to read about your views. And I would like to thank you again for accepting my invitation. I hope you liked it, and please go ahead with the last word.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shir. I also would like to thank our audience for attending before Iftar. That was the only time that we could arrange for this. I hope you are spending a good Ramadan. Sahaftorkom, and look forward to the next broadcast from Jazair Hope. Thank you. Bye bye.
احنا الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ، عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمو مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمار. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف، هما ما كانوش عارفين.
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين. علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي، هما ما كانوش فاهمين.
حبوا يدي والبلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع علي الجميلة ونسى الآخرين. من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي، ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين.
واش نذكر واش نخلي، شهداء رواحهم طاهرين. مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي، وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم،
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم.
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين،
بلي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
بلي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.